Okay, so we want to welcome Deb Ostrike to the stage. Deb is going to give our invocation tonight.
Heavenly Father, we come humbly before you, seeking your guidance to help us serve with integrity and wisdom. We are embarking on a new era of liberty, a liberty that has endured and is the result of only one thing: vigilance. As George Washington observed in his first inaugural address, the preservation of the sacred fire of liberty and the destiny of the republic model of government are justly considered as deeply, perhaps as finally staked on the experiment entrusted to the hands of the American people. As a country, we were led to serve and inspire unfathomable shifts this past year. Each and every one of us has an opportunity to continue to make a profound impact going forward. Heavenly Father, may your divine presence surround our nation and our 47th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and his entire cabinet, their families, and all who have had a hand in building the greatness of America. May we, under God and before all the world, once again demonstrate the greatness of all liberty's secrets, that it is won and secured by those who care least for the exigencies of the moment and most for the future of their posterity. We gather together and thank you, Heavenly Father. May you lead us in the way of integrity, and may our efforts with your guidance bear good fruit. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Deb. Thank you. Okay, so Mindy, if you can give us a flag, we can all stand. And I usually ask, and I have everybody standing, so I'm a little bit rusty because we really haven't met since last October. So if you are a veteran, can you raise your hand for me? All right. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Okay, will you come up and lead us since you're right here?
Do what?
Lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh.
Just get us started.
Ready? I pledge allegiance to the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm very excited for tonight's meeting. What a difference from October, huh? It hardly seems possible that in 7 days, Donald J. Trump will place his hand on the Bible and get sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. For the last 4 years, we've suffered through a nightmare that seemed like it would never end. Our nightmare began when we went to bed on election night in 2020, confident that the president that had rallied hundreds of thousands to his events, in comparison to the candidate that campaigned from his basement, would win. Only we woke up in the morning to the left's jubilation, into our horror that Joe Biden had mysteriously won. Any political party that's willing to pull off that type of deceit would not be interested in following the will of the people, and thus we knew what that meant for our nation. Our horror was magnified when on January 6th, we witnessed the Fedsurrection, an induced riot infested with federal agents, and the full scope of what the country really faced became even clearer. Brace for impact. Whoever was controlling the power dials in Washington came out with COVID recommendations that transformed into mandates, temporary pandemic restrictions that transferred into permanent status, and a crowd of profoundly unattractive men with wildly atypical sexual appetites transitioned into our federal government and began busily transforming the nation's laws to better suit their twisted predilections. Over the next 4 years, they twisted the law to sue and charge Donald Trump in every way. They raided his house. They searched for papers in Melania's intimate apparel drawer. And they attempted to assassinate him, not once or twice. President Trump's presidency seemed all but impossible. Despite their best crooked efforts, they could not convince the American public to elect their Biden replacement. And thus Kamala Harris went down like the Chinese spy balloon should have. Most polls and political pundits had predicted Donald Trump would lose, and lose badly. But the American people saw through the pandemic, the ridiculous lawfare against President Trump and his supporters, the horrific security breaches by the Secret Service, and the final Hail Mary pass to keep Trump out of office. In 7 days, Trump walked to the microphone and announced to the world that Joe Biden is fired. But in nearly every conceivable way, Trump is better posed to accomplish his agenda now than he would have been had he won 4 years ago. What it all adds up to is we're about to see something like we've never seen before. Not at least in probably anyone here's living memory. And I, for one, can't wait. God bless America. We're going to, I want to run through a couple of things here, and then we're going to welcome Professor William Wagner to the stage, so that we want to be very courteous to our speakers. And we understand there might be like a weather warning, so we want to get him on his way safely back home, he and his lovely wife. But before we begin, I just want to recognize and show appreciation for the people that helped to make this event so worth it and so possible. That would be Dar, Wave, Vivian, Marge, Kathy, Mindy, our IT specialist. We'd also like to thank Ken Gardner, our videographer. Thank you, Ken. I'm not forgetting Linda. How could I forget Linda? This month's basket creator is Linda Stickowitz, and she created a beautiful inaugural basket complete with a 2025 Trump calendar. And, shoot, it's in my bag, but I wanted to show you, it also includes a talking Trump clock. So that you'll be reminded every hour that our president is working to make America great again. You're never going to be able to forget. You can be a winner of this beautiful basket by buying one ticket for $5, or you can buy $20 for 6 tickets. It's a deal. It's a deal. We also have Trump calendars, a few Trump calendars in the back. Do we still have any of those left? Okay, so we just have a couple more of the Trump calendars are also for sale back there. So if that interests you and you want to buy one, the ladies have that back there.
How much are they?
$20.
Oh, for the, they're so
Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead here, like I said, and we're going to welcome William Wagner to the stage. William Wagner is an internationally recognized expert in constitutional law. He previously served in the U.S. courts as a federal judge. Prior to his appointment on the federal bench, he served as legal advisor and chief American diplomat for the Department of Justice at an American embassy in Africa. William also served as a senior U.S. prosecutor, litigating hundreds of federal cases and serving as Chief of Appellate Litigation for the Office of the U.S. Attorney. Prior to serving in the Justice Department, Professor Wagner served as legal counsel to the U.S. Senate. Tonight, he joins us to discuss how the weaponization of law over the past few years has diminished citizens' trust in our justice system, and how the incoming administration is going to restore good governance and the rule of law, beginning with the United States Department of Justice. So with that, please give a warm welcome to Professor William Wagner.
Well, it is so good to be back here, and we were trying to figure out how long ago it was, and I think it was like 2018, so it was a long time ago. And between, the last time I was here, we'll add a couple of things to the bio. One of the things that we did is we were the lawyers in the Supreme Court for you guys and for everybody in 2020, fighting a couple cases all the way to the court, all the way to the Supreme Court, and as you recall, we weren't as successful as we'd like to have been. And at that point, I saw that we were dealing with a different world than the world that I had experienced when I was at the Department of Justice. When I was there, it was a very, very different world. You would have been fired. You would have been fired immediately. Not like put on probation or something. You would have been fired immediately if you would have authorized a search and seizure like the one you described down in Mar-a-Lago, or some of the other ones that some of the president's people had to go through, simply because of who they were in a political context. To have pre-dawn raids on a home with full riot gear. In my day, we used that kind of raid in only one situation, where it was a life and death situation. You're going after the biggest drug kingpin who had more ammunition than some countries' armies do. And you did that for the safety of the agents. You didn't use it as a technique to intimidate or to weaponize the law. And I want to spend some time talking about what that weaponization was, how dangerous it is, not just to our country, but in a worldwide, context, and what we can do about it, and what we can have, why we can have some hope because of what I see coming in on incoming administration. I always start though, well, first of all, I want to give you a free ebook on good governance, because we haven't had any of that in the last 4 years. And so it's a if you take slgwitness.com/good governance, you can download the book for free. But we're going to talk about a couple of different approaches to seeing the world. One says, in the beginning, God, and it starts out with the idea that there is right and wrong, good and bad, just and unjust, that truth actually exists, and that matters in our individual lives as we go about our day to understand that truth exists. But it also matters with regard to our institutions too, because you can never have institutions of integrity if you don't have first people in those institutions that have virtue. And you have virtue by looking outside of who you are. It's not notwithstanding what the world is saying, that it's all about you and your personal autonomy and your identity. No, it's about, in the beginning, God. And there is an outside standard that we can look to know what is right and wrong, good and bad, just and unjust. And if we can't read, we don't even have to read, because the Bible says the Lord has put it on our hearts. And so, when God's out there creating the world, and He did this incredible, if you go out and look at the stars and you see these amazing things, and we live in this great state of Michigan where we have things like a rainbow trout, and see how beautiful that is, you know, and the animals that the Lord created. He created each one of those things, and he said it was good. And then he created man and woman. He said it was very good. And when God's out there doing good and very good, it doesn't take the devil very long, does it? Before let's give a different lens and a different perspective through which to see the world. And so a couple of chapters later, the serpent was more cunning than any animal in the field. That just sounds like what we've been dealing with the administration recently, hasn't it? In which the Lord God hath made, and he said to the woman, did God really say? You're not supposed to have that? You know, do you really have to follow? You don't have to follow that perspective that God has given you. You can all be all about you and your personal autonomy. Let's just go. And so that's going to be kind of an underlying theme I want you to be thinking about as I talk about the weaponization, you know, of our judicial institutions, of our justice institutions, of our legal system. And what is weaponization? Well, when a regime attempts to use the legal and justice institutions to target political opponents, or to suppress dissent, or to achieve political or personal gain, that's what we call the weaponization of an institution. Part of the reason that Something Like Global, that this ministry that we started after I left academia and left public service, was because of this weaponization. And we faced this weaponization on day one. Do you guys remember Lois Lerner?
Oh, yeah.
Well, when we applied to be a 501c3 civil rights organization, humanitarian organization, educational organization, we had some of the best lawyers, as you can imagine, put that package together. We dotted every I, crossed every T, and we got this nice little letter hand-signed by Lois saying, nope, we've got some serious questions, and this is going to take a very, very long time. And man, we got to find that letter, because they should have saved that letter. We could have auctioned it off or something at a fundraiser. And it was months and months and months they denied us. And we had members of Congress coming to us and saying, hey, can we use you at our congressional hearings as we do these oversight? I said, well, you know, I've been in government a long time, and this is what I want you to take to heart as well. Never be too quick to jump to the conclusion that it's corruption when, you know, incompetence is a possibility. And when it comes to government, you know, those of you that have dealt with government know that both of those are possibilities. And so we waited and we waited and we waited. And just about the time that we were ready to pull the plug and file the lawsuit, the truth came out about who Lois Lerner was. And about 5 minutes after that, we got this letter from the IRS saying, we're sorry, you have a perfect application, you're authorized. We do not have a single question for you. That's how we got started. So we were birthed in the fire of weaponization. And you know, selective enforcement, overreach of prosecutors, legal harassment, I was 26 years old. Maybe I just turned 27. I was 26 years old when the first time I put my hand on the Holy Bible and raised the other hand toward heaven, promised to uphold this Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, so help me God. And, you know, I don't know if you can imagine what, you know, that must have been like for a 26 and 27-year-old kid. To be working at the Department of Justice, going after the baddest of the bad guys. The people that preyed on innocent folks, and having the power of the government to find right and to punish wrong. The Bible talks about condoning that which is good and punishing that which is evil. It was a very different Department of Justice back then. My interview and my first year of training was over and over and over again. I felt like I was in an ethics class where my superiors would ask me very, very, very hard questions over and over again. Very hard scenario. Well, what would you do in this situation? What would you do in this? How would you handle that situation? Well, what if you did that and then this happened? All of it so that there was an understanding that when we acted, you were doing the right thing, no matter if it what the cost was. Because as a prosecutor, our job was not to get a conviction. Our job was to see that justice was done. And back then, it mattered that you knew the difference between what justice was and what it wasn't. And guess what? It didn't matter if there was a Republican in the White House or a Democrat in the White House. I served under attorney generals from both parties, without fear or favor. And back then, I don't know if you noticed, but go check it out. Back then, at the National Convention, there was one cabinet member that would not appear at the convention of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Guess what it was? The Attorney General of the United States. Because their job was to serve with fear or favor to no party and to see that justice was done. We've come a long way from that, haven't we, folks? A government action, because this is the full power of the government. The reason that I had to put my hand on the Holy Bible and put the other hand toward heaven and swear and affirm that I would uphold the Constitution of the United States, so help me God, was to remind me of the tremendous amount of power that the position that you were just as a person that you were going to be filling, that position had power. And that you were to exercise that power in a way that you understood that no one is above the law, not even the king. And that's a big deal. When an investigation occurred because a crime was committed. And I worked, and most of them are in heaven now because I'm getting older myself. But I worked with some of the, if I told you I worked with FBI agents and DEA agents of people that of immense integrity, it almost sounds like an oxymoron now, doesn't it? But these were men and women of immense integrity. One of them could have been a brain surgeon, and he felt that God had called him instead to find ways to make sure the smartest of the smartest bad guys didn't get away with it. How fun was that to go to work each day? And an investigation occurred because a crime was committed. The agents would go investigate the crime that was committed. They would collect evidence to determine who committed the crime, and then they would collect enough evidence to make sure you could meet all the elements of a crime. And the way that works is you have two different main elements of a crime. You've got the intent and you've got the act. And you've got to be able as a prosecutor to prove both of those things. So you've got to prove criminal intent and you've got to prove that a criminal act occurred. Not just that an act occurred. You're already understanding what I'm talking about more than anybody, aren't you? Not just that an act occurred, but that there was criminal intent behind the act. And without that, you don't have a crime. With that, now you know who did the crime. You've got evidence that you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the highest standard of proof in the law. That's the highest standard of proof in law. And then you go forward without fear or favor to any political party. The crime was committed, you do the crime, you do the time. What happened sometime, I think, in the Obama administration, perhaps even in the Clinton administration, but certainly in the Obama administration, they began to see that law enforcement, that agencies with law enforcement power, like the IRS, like the Department of Justice, could be used to further their political ends. Now, let me tell you, I did a lot of diplomatic work overseas. I've seen I've seen developing countries deteriorate into civil war because those in power decide to weaponize their justice systems to advance their political preferences. And so to watch that happen in this country was a bit astounding to me, because we had been sending diplomats all over the world, supposedly, to bring good governance and the rule of law, and the best thing that we have with regard to our republic and the democratic institutions around the world, and to bring truth. And to watch that happen here, where instead of having a crime where the agents would go gather evidence to find out who committed the crime, you found a person that was in your way of your political agenda, and then you went and gathered evidence to create a crime or find a crime to take that person down. Now let me tell you, if someone asks a lawyer what kind of lawyer they are, the best answer is, I'm a good one. But I don't even think it takes a really good lawyer. Well, actually, we know that for sure, because I think I'm looking at Alvin Bragg and some of these folks up in Manhattan. It doesn't even take a good lawyer to be able to create a crime with regard to anybody in the country. And so, to switch over and have that paradigm shift be so big, to this idea that it doesn't matter anymore because now it's all about me and my personal autonomy. My perspective on the world is, hey, I have the power, therefore I can do this stuff. I can target a person. It's no longer without fear or favor to any political party. It's no longer about was the crime committed, and if the crime was committed, we'll find the evidence, and if you did the crime, you do the time. It's not anymore. Now it's, if you're in my way, I'll take you down. And if you are friends of people and associated with people that are in my way, I will take you down. In an attempt to undermine, and these are my personal views, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this and looking at the evidence as much as I can in many of these cases. In an attempt to, but this is my personal view, in an attempt to undermine his 2024 presidential campaign, political opponents of the president brought multiple politically motivated criminal indictments. There wasn't a crime out there that led to the president. There was a president out there that they wanted to destroy and ensure that he could never run again. And so they brought federal charges. The classified documents case. Of all the cases, and there's just so many of them out there. There's so many of them out there. If there actually ever was a case out there, because I try to be fair in my presentations, where you actually had evidence that you could put it all together and maybe a jury could find, that these elements had been met. It may have been that there were some documents at Mar-a-Lago. But guess what? Everything else about that prosecution as well was wrong, including the fact that it was politically motivated from the very beginning, including the fact that, in all likelihood, the president had the power just by saying so that those documents weren't classified. Notwithstanding that another president had exactly, but probably even more documents in even a less secure fashion all over the place. And so, but it was President Trump that was charged with unlawfully retaining national defense information. Give me a break. He was the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He was the commander-in-chief. The Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, commander-in-chief. The January 6th God bless you. God bless all of you. Now, is there somebody on that day that ought to have been indicted for something? Probably. I don't know. But I know that all have sinned and fallen short, and some go farther than they. But I also know that almost everybody that I've been aware of were there as American citizens, and they were engaging in political expression, the most protected expression that the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is supposed to protect. And I don't know, we don't have a speaking fee or anything tonight, but if we did, I'd say give it to some of those folks that are probably still in jail right now. Talk about political prisoners. I mean, who in your lifetime did you think that the United States would be having political prisoners? I mean, that's something we hear about around the world. It's something that Russia does to gain an advantage in a diplomatic debate. That's not something what happens here in the United States of America. A lot of criminal cases have come out of that January 6th event and the state charges that Trump is facing, and just, I disagree, because someone's going to ask the question, I disagree with what the U.S. Supreme Court just did. Roberts was wrong. But have hope, folks. I'm absolutely convinced there is a majority, if not a supermajority, on that court that's going to reverse that conviction for 15 different reasons. They just weren't. They were just going to try and let the appellate process work. And I get it. I do a lot of U.S. Supreme Court work, and the Supreme Court bar, that's kind of the way they think. You know, go slow, go incremental. Don't try to jump courts and I do it. I don't like it. It was wrong. I think they had a legitimate reason to be in the court. They had an issue that was different that couldn't be handled down the road. And the issue was you've got a duly elected president by the people of the United States. Does that immunity kick in now? Should you be hearing this case now? Now, I told you I spent some time looking at these cases. That New York case, if there ever was a kangaroo court, and sometimes we just hear stuff because we read stuff with people we agree with. But let me tell you, from somebody who sat as a prosecutor for many, many years and a federal judge who reviewed these kind of things and without fear or favor judged these things, this is an atrocity. Both that judge and that prosecutor should lose their licenses. There is no chance that this case, in my view, survives forever. Remember I told you had to have an intent? And you had to have an act? You also have to have a unanimous agreement among the jury that there was an intent in the act. First of all, they made up the crime. Once they made up the crime, they couldn't get 12 jurors to agree that any particular fact, there was both of those elements we just talked about, but yet the judge found it to be a conviction. Accepted the guilty verdict. And then through once again, the way that he's sentenced by saying we're not going to put the president in jail, that once again was a weaponization of the law, I have to tell you. He did that in a way to avoid the Supreme Court from ruling on the case, because if indeed there would have been something that would have interfered with the exercise of the powers of the president, the court would have had to take the case and decide it. So that judge was not doing anybody any favors. Trust me on this. That was part of his continued weaponization of his court against a political enemy that he had donated against in the election. Politically motivated Democratic prosecutors throughout the country prosecuted these cases. Now, I got to tell you, every now and then, you know, as a professor, you don't necessarily hear back from some of your students from time to time, and they thank you, and that's kind of an uplift. But you know what? That young woman in Georgia, Ashley, I'm going to take a little credit for teaching not everything she knew, but I taught her everything she knew back when she was a law student. And she, without fear or favor, right? She fiercely went after the truth. And there's a lesson for all of us, right? You know, how much could have that cost her? Because if you're a lawyer these days, you know, let me trust me, most of them are on the other side. And it's going to cost you in your stature with the world. But guess what? It didn't bother her. I watched her for a few months over and over again just fiercely go after the truth, and that case is gone now. Ashley Merchant, she was the defense lawyer in the Georgia case, who exposed Fannie Willis for all the corruption that was involved. Again, yes, and that's going to come. And before this is over, you watch a lot more of the communication from Washington to these different places, Washington to Michigan, Washington to Georgia. They were determined to use the justice system to advance their political end. And let me give you a response to the Hunter Biden thing. Oh, so maybe this... See, I'm speaking to the family here. I don't got to explain things to you. Yeah, you know, most of the time when I'm out here talking to one of my, you know, old lefty professor friends, they would say, well, what about Hunter Biden? They prosecuted him. That was all part of, again, in my view, the weaponization of a justice system. And, you know, what you saw was none of the crime. You had whistleblowers that came forward on this as well. So I hope something further happens on this. Whistleblowers coming forward saying, these were the crimes they weren't letting us going forward. These were the crimes we were looking for. We weren't going after Biden. This is the crimes we found. We're going after the evidence. It led us to Hunter. It's going to probably lead us to other people like the president. And so by bringing a slam dunk gun charge that in no way could be connected to anything the president was involved with, tell me that that's not weaponizing the justice system. Especially if the fix was in on the pardon from the very beginning. Now, I've got no evidence that it was. And one of the things that I try to do is I try to not say things that I don't have evidence to back up. Because that's one of the things I think we, on the conservative wing of the party, we mess up on sometimes because we're passionate. Let's make sure that we got something to support. I can't support that the fix was in on that pardon. But man, it sure smells like a... You know, when I go fishing and it starts smelling like stinky fish outside in the garbage can the next day, did I catch a fish? Probably. That garbage man didn't see me catch the fish, but that's kind of what this pardon thing is. It stinks all the... So, you know, the Justice Department shielded Mr. Hunter Biden from the harsher charges. Why? Because the criminal activity would have led them to you know, other folks. So, the Black Lives Matter protests and riots. Prosecutors all throughout this country were lenient on people committing violent crimes, very often on film. I got a call from one of you. It's not this group, but it's one of you guys, just like one of you guys. Well, it doesn't matter where it's at. It's in Washtenaw County. She had been carrying the blue flag in front of the police department, supporting the police and first responders, when she was attacked by a Black Lives Matter activist. The attack was caught on film, including law enforcement video, with law enforcement witnesses supporting her. When they went to the prosecutor, and I'll say his name because it's Eli Sabat, he refused to prosecute. And so I represented the victim and went in an entire little talk with the prosecutor. And he said, there's just not sufficient evidence. All right. Now you know what we're up against. Now you know what you're up against. I mean, when you weaponize the state level prosecutorial practices, because, you know, a lot of these prosecutors, you know, follow the money on where their political campaigns went, it's not a surprise that they've gone to far leftist policies that do anything but protect and serve the community. How am I doing on time?
Good.
I've got some hope, though. Couple of things. I told you about that so-called conviction and that sentencing of President Trump. Well, you know who's on trial now. The Supreme Court didn't take that case early, but it will. So you know who's on trial now, because it said we want the appeal process to go. So guess what? The appeal process is going to go. And now we're going to see if the appellate court system in the state of New York has any integrity at all, because this is such a piece of crap prosecution. I've never seen anything other than outside the United States in developing Banana Republic type crazy stuff out that goes out in the world, where there's developing countries and where there's civil wars and things like that going. Outside of that, I've never seen anything close to that in the United States. And so you know who's on trial, folks, now? The prosecutor and the judge. Prosecutor and the judge. And let's see. So I have hope, because it wasn't just you that was following the facts of these cases. It was the American people. It was the American people. And I believe there are a lot of reasons that the vote went the way it did in such an overwhelming way. But I think one of the main reasons that the vote went the way it did in such an overwhelming way is because the people were tired of two things. They were tired of the weaponization of a justice system, because they understand the justice system, you have to have integrity there. Your country can't survive with it. In some of these other countries where I worked, and the justice system broke down, well, guess what? If you're a company being asked to come in and invest millions of dollars to put a telecom system together for the country, are you going to come in if you don't have a justice system that you can trust to resolve a dispute fairly, where a justice system is either taking bribes or giving the win to the political preferred side? No, you're not going to come in and invest in a country. A country literally cannot survive if its justice systems lose legitimacy. And I think a great number of the American citizenry understood that. And you combine that they were done with the fact that people were telling them it's okay for a man to go into your little girl's locker room and to compete against your little girl in sports. And I think that was it. The other side hasn't been defeated.
No.
They're a little lame right now and they're a little injured, but let me tell you, if you've ever run into an injured animal before, once they get the chance, they're scrappier than they've ever been before. And so I do have hope, though. I have hope because, number one, the American people are now watching like they've never watched before. And part of the reason they're watching is because of groups like yours. You're getting the word out. You're talking to your neighbors. And truth is starting to emerge as something that's important again. The other thing that I think, what reason we have a lot of hope is I'm looking at the nominees for the President's Cabinet, especially in the area of the FBI and in the Justice Department. Pam Bondi, we were in Florida for a long, long time. I'm telling you, don't mess with that lady. She is a seasoned prosecutor. She has outstanding executive skills. She served as an attorney general, and she has no fear of fighting for the truth. And because of that, I've got a lot of hope. I think one of the things we have to be careful on is if we turn around and politicize the justice system, that's going to backfire on us. If we find crimes and they lead to people that have big D's after the name, well, without fear or favor, you do the crime, you do the time. But Pam Bondi, I've never seen her engage in a political prosecution where she would target a person and then go after them. So I think and again, I think you had an old bio. I went back and actually served in the last part of the Trump administration as the senior advisor at the State Department. And one of the things that I saw upon my arrival, even minutes before I arrived, I had avoided using words like the deep state before because I always thought that they weren't productive in polite company. In rooms like this where we get along, but man, I ran headlong into an ugly deep state where within minutes of me arriving in Washington, they had, and the other thing that's being weaponized is the Inspector General's offices. They had filed numerous complaints. They said that Pompeo was trying to load the State Department with Christian people. Oh my God! I mean, that was the. I'm not like exaggerating or changing the words. That's the words they use. I mean, just because Christian people are probably the biggest minority in that department, but they use the Inspector General's office to file frivolous complaints after frivolous complaints after frivolous complaints. Why? Because even though each one of those complaints ends up being dismissed as frivolous, you're taking the top level people that are supposed to be implementing the president's agenda, and you've got them busy dealing with these stupid Inspector General frivolous complaints. I'm pretty sure that they've got a handle on how they're going to handle it. I don't know how, but I know that they know the problem's there, and so hopefully they're going to fix it. So I want to just probably finish because I'm probably at my time here. And let's go. Well, first of all, know that that's the question. That's Rex Rex or Rex Lex. Either the king is the law or nobody's above the law, not even the king. And what we're hopefully going to transition to is from this wrong-headed place that they felt because they were in office, they could do whatever they wanted to. And we're going to return the power to the people where no one's above the law, not even the Attorney General or any of any official in government. Let's finish with the next slide. Next one. Next one. Next one. Go back one. Go back one. I was looking for politics. Go back one. Go back one. Right there. I want to finish with the definition of politics that the framers of your great Constitution would have used. The science of government, that part of ethics, there was a moral core to every government action, every prosecution choice. That's part of ethics which consists in the regulation and government of a nation or a state, the preservation of its safety, peace, and prosperity, and the protection of its citizens in their rights with the preservation and improvement of their morals. When was the last time you saw a definition of politics that said that there was a moral and an ethical core to every law and to every government action? I have hope that we're going to be returning to a perspective that is more like that which the founders used. But we have to be ever vigilant. We cannot stop and rest now that we won an election. Now more than ever, the citizenry needs to participate. And I'll give you a little bit of homework. In the next 6 months, the president is going to issue more, probably within the first 6 days, the president's going to issue a number of executive orders.
Good.
Support the president when he does that, because they're going to be undoing much of what the previous president did. But what they did the last 4 years was just diabolically evil. They used the power of every one of their alphabet agencies, every one of their departments, where they were able to make rules, make laws without having to be elected, because these were bureaucrats that make rules through the rule-making procedure. And they were the ones that rules that said, well, a man is no longer a man and a woman is no longer a woman. If a man says he's a woman, he can play basketball against a woman and can go into her locker room. And education institution, if you don't follow that, we're going to take away your accreditation. That's the kind of crap that was going on. So guess what? In the next 6 months, there's going to be, in the next year probably, there's going to be thousands of those kinds of things going on. I want you to go on to the federal government page where you can look at the rules. And when the president puts a rule that impacts you guys, there's this notice and comment time. Take a minute and write a comment. Because the other side is flooding those websites with their woke comments. And so we need to be supporting the president and his new agenda. As these rules continue, as they get posted, there will be an opportunity for the American citizenry to comment. That'll be your opportunity to have a huge impact and maybe save this republic. It's something.gov. It might be federalregulations.gov, but if you type into like Google or do a search, federal regulations status.
William,
Yes.
I'll get it from you and I'll send it.
Yeah, I'll send it to Marion, and you can send it to her. God bless you guys for what you do, and thank you for having us back.
So we were able, 7 of us were able to run last August to be electors for 2024. 6 of us won.
Yay!
So, as I said, on December 17th, we went to Lansing, and we had a meeting on the Senate floor. We were able to bring guests. It was pretty cool. Bill Rowerding told me it would be pretty cool, and he was right. He was a 2016 elector. So I appreciate his encouragement to do this again. But anyway, so I brought just 3 pictures from the signing that I thought were pretty cool. So this this is my youngest son, Gavin Sheridan. He was able to join me on the House floor that night, or the Senate floor. And then this is Pastor Lorenzo. Remember we had him here in September? So he's going to be doing benediction at the inauguration. Isn't that super cool? On the big stage. How many people will be there, Bill? Any guesstimate?
In 2017, there were 1.4 million.
Oh my gosh. And I get nervous about talking in front of this crowd. Anyway, it was an awesome experience, and I'm just so appreciative for those that elected me to that position again.
And we appreciate
Had confidence that I was going to flub it again. So, anyway. Okay, so I want to get Shane Trejo up here to the stage for a minute. He's going to tell us, we're doing a commercial break. And Shane's going to get up and do a little advertising about a couple events that he's involved with.
Okay, I'll make this quick. I got a couple things I want to tell you guys about. As I'm sure you all know, there's a chairmanship race coming up for the Michigan Republican Party. So the brand new party pack, for which I'm the chair, we're going to be doing a delegate training. So if you're a new delegate, the first half of the call is going to be a delegate training. So please come on for that. The second half of the call, I'm going to train you on what to expect in convention, what your duties are as a delegate, things along those lines. We're going to have Marion on there, along with Kristen Lee and Susan Kokinda, to talk about what it means to be a delegate. And then we're going to have a candidate forum for the MRP chair candidates. So all the different candidates have said that there would be on Joe Sella, who's here tonight, also Scott Greenlee, and then Jim Runstead and Michonne Maddock of the county, who we're very familiar with. So they'll all be on there, be asked the same questions having to do with what are you going to do about the anti-Trump rhino influence in the party that still remains and is still lingering around. What are you going to do to remove that from the party? What type of consultants are you going to be working with? How are you going to raise money while not being beholden to that money, with the strings attached and all that sort of stuff that we have had in the past that has not helped us. So they're all getting the same questions. It's going to be a fair forum, and then some questions from the floor that you'll be able to take. So that's going to be a week from Wednesday, and you can learn more at gnppac.com. That website might be down right now, unfortunately, but if so, I'll make sure that Marion can. We'll get it out to you guys via email, so you'll have access to that and be able to register. Next thing, Mindy.
Where is that at? Where's it going to be held?
Zoom. So it'll be online. It's an online Zoom thing. Yes. And then the next thing we're doing is the Grand New Party is doing a Washington Day dinner coming up on February 7th. It's going to be our annual thing where we do the 10th Amendment Awards, where we give 10th Amendment Awards to lawmakers who have upheld the Constitution and put forward bills that would protect our state sovereignty from enemies in the federal government, pushing back against the state government on behalf of the people. So we'll be giving those awards to Senator John Lindsay, and then the members of the Michigan Freedom Caucus, of which Matt Maddock is a member. Yes. So the point of this 10th Amendment Awards is, we're all very happy that President Trump has won, but we got to remember what animated us to get involved in the first place, to get involved and join the Tea Party and join this movement, protecting the Constitution of the United States of America. So it goes beyond one election cycle. It's as Thomas Jefferson said, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. So we're going to remain vigilant and keep fighting for the Constitution, honor the heroes in Lansing who've gone against the will of the special interests and the lobbyists and all the bad influences and stood strong. We're going to honor them, and we're going to have a speaker who's named Dave Benner, a constitutional author, 10th Amendment Center contributor, who's an expert on the subject, who's going to tell you about the history of the Constitution and galvanize you to fight back and continue fighting for the Constitution and not listening to the excuses for why we should capitulate and not do the right thing and play ball with the bad guys. No, you got to stand strong 100% of the time. So go to gnppac.com. Might be down. Hopefully it's back up. I had my web guy working on it. If not, Marion, I'll make sure Marion has that information in a subsequent email. Amber, I think, handed out a lot of flyers. Maybe not to everyone, but to most people. But she'll get you at the door if she didn't get you earlier. So check out those two events, and thank you for your time, Marion.
Thank you, Shane. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about upcoming inaugural festivities. But first, as that day fast approaches and when Joe Biden will be departing the White House. Yeah. We only got one short week to put up with him. So the Babylon Bee obtained the following official itinerary to show just what Joe might be up to in his final days in the presidency. So tomorrow, January 14th, he's going to sign an executive order making all previous executive orders permanent with no backsies. On the 15th, he's going to help Jill carry White House valuables out to her car. On the 16th, he's going to hold one last Coke orgy in the West Wing. On the 17th, he's going to have Hunter do one final sweep for any remaining bags of cocaine. On the 18th, he's going to give Taiwan to China in a real quick deal. On the 19th, he's going to launch a few nukes at Russia. Just give Trump a little something more to deal with. And on the 20th, he's going to use the Oval Office bathroom and forget to flush. With everything accomplished, Joe's going to ride off into the sunset to spend the rest of his life relaxing with Jill, Hunter, and cases of stolen, highly classified documents. So we have the enjoyment of having the 11th Congressional District Chair here tonight, Mr. Bill Rowerdink. Bill was a 2016 elector, as I mentioned previously, and he attended President Trump's first inauguration. Bill's going to share with us some of his experiences. So with that, please give Bill a warm welcome. Afterwards, or even during it, I think it's fine if you have any questions to ask Bill about the inauguration. He seems to always have a lot of answers.
Thank you. First, I want to have a New Year's resolution that Shane Trejo needs to come out of his shell, and he needs to be a little more outspoken, don't you think? So Shane, could you work on that? God bless you, man. You're fired up every time you talk. Thanks for a minute to talk. Marion asked that I say a few things about the inauguration. My wife and I, let me back up. I was elected an elector in 2016, as Marion was this year, and as Sean Maddock was this year. It's sort of a big deal. Not because of the person. It's not a big deal that Marion got it. It's not a big deal that I was an elector. It's a big deal because it's a historic thing. Our signatures are now in the archives. They're in the Hall of Library of Congress. They're all these places because you're part of the history of the country. So when that happened in 16, my wife and I, and over here somewhere there she is, we decided to go to the inauguration. I voted as an elector, and I wanted to see the act completed. And so in 17, we went. Mindy, would you put that last sign up? I don't know if you can see it. It says inauguration. That one, inauguration, January 20th. That was actually January 20th of 17, not this year. So the sign's the same. And for those who can't see it, it says expect delays. Now to put this in geography of Michigan, this sign would have been about at Clarkston, and we were going to downtown Detroit. So the signs were miles away saying expect delays because there was 1.4 million people at this event. Even in DC terms, it's a big crowd. So we went, and would you put the next slide up? Well, this is a bunch of events. Let me talk a little bit. I'm not gonna. This has a lot of detail on it. There's a billion events, millions of events. States have events, all kinds of things. The ones that Michigan people tend to go to, there's a thing called the Michigan Society Gala. Boy, doesn't that sound fancy. What it really is the bipartisan congressional members. So Deborah Dingell and John Molinar could be in the same room, and their staffs have a gala. So it's quite nice. It's all Michiganders, but it's all around the state. It's a big party. So my wife and I went in 2017. We're going to go again this year. That's a nice event. There are a lot of events for groups that are like trade associations, bankers, lawyers, hospitals, energy companies. They're all free, but you just got to get invited. So we're not special people, so we don't get invited to most of those. But they're free if you can get invited. The other things that are fun, on the day of the inauguration, which is always the 20th. So in 17, the 20th was on a Friday. This year, the 20th is on Monday. So it's a little bit different vibe because Sunday is not going to be a party night. And 18, Thursday was a party night. Sunday's not going to be that this year. So on the day of the inauguration, it's a very long day. The city is, for those who went to any large event, there's security perimeters that take up pretty much the whole city. That you need to get through just to get into the area where the events are happening. So on the day of the inauguration, we were through security, my wife and I were through security at approximately 8 a.m. to get an area to be in. The actual swearing in is at noon. So the actual swearing in, if you've ever seen it, takes about 30 seconds. The run-up takes hours, but the actual swearing in is, do you promise? So help you God, boom, done. Yeah. Then the cannons start firing, it's a big thing. Then he gives his inauguration speech. So that's done at maybe 12:45 or 1. And then you go to the parade, and then the parade goes on for a couple hours. And then you go to the presidential balls that night. And if you got a ticket to the inauguration, it's likely that you got a ticket to the balls and the other things that happened that day. And there's no rhyme or reason to it. I know some people in the 11th district got their tickets to go to the inauguration from Haley Stevens, who's a Democratic congressional person. Why would she get tickets? All Congress people get tickets, right? They'll get tickets. Why would she need tickets to see Donald Trump sworn in? She wouldn't. So I suggested to people, ask everybody. Ask your Republicans, but don't forget to ask your Democrats. I heard tonight, somebody else got tickets from a Democratic congressperson from Michigan to go to the inauguration because they don't need the tickets, but they get them anyway. Anyway, would you put up the picture of? Keep going, one more. There you go. This is tough for this side of the room to see. This was a picture that I took with my little camera from my phone, looking at the Capitol building. So we had pretty good seats, and you could actually see the swearing-in ceremony takes place right about here, and you could actually see if someone said that's Hillary Clinton, you could actually see them because we were relatively close. Obviously, these people are all the dignitaries, the Supreme Court, and all that crap. And flip the next picture up. This, on the other hand, is if I took that picture at the Capitol, then I turned around this way and took this picture looking the other way. I was, again, sorry for these folks.
Careful. Well, no one's sitting on that. Yeah.
But he wants me over there because of the camera. But this is the picture of the crowd. Again, I'm looking that way to see the Capitol. Turn around. I don't know if you can see it or not. The crowd goes back to about there. And that's the group that they said was 1.4 million people. And you don't even capture the people that are over here to the left and over to the left, they're right here to the left. So it's a huge crowd. As you can see, everyone's wearing rain slickers because it rained that day. It's like going to a football game. Dress for the weather. Could be cold, could be windy, could be rainy. You can see all the slickers. So, once the inauguration is done, there's a parade.